like this, that would benefit.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's 5 o'clock. Welcome to the hybrid in-person and virtual meeting for the Committee of Adjustment for the Township of Central Frontenac. Members of the public may join in person or virtually. For those of you who may be new to the Committee of Adjustment, my name is Bill Everett, and I am the chair of the committee. We also have township members from my left: Dan Meeks, Duncan McGregor, Susan Irwin, Nikki Gowdy. From my right, Susan Clagus. Oh, geez. Sorry, Lynn. Lynn Clagus, Francis Smith, and Philip Smith. For staff, we have to my right, Abigail McKinnon and Jenny Capusta. Chris Nelson, our community service coordinator, will be assisting us as the meeting host. We are, excuse me. The format of the meeting will follow the agenda posted online. Staff have prepared a presentation to follow along with during the meeting. This will be shown on the screen. For each application with a public hearing, we will follow this format. I, as the chair, will introduce the file so that everyone knows where we are on the agenda. The planner will provide an overview of the application. We will then ask are there any comments from the applicant or their agent? Committee members may then ask staff and the applicant or their agent questions, if any. The public will then have the opportunity to ask questions or provide comments. I encourage you to ask any questions you may have. The committee will then deliberate and vote on the application. Voting will take place with members of the committee raising their hands or verbal confirmation if attending online. I will then state whether the vote was carried. All members of the public will have an opportunity to provide comments on the new applications. Please note that as of January 1st, 2023, only persons specified in the Act are permitted to appeal consent and minor variance applications. Township staff will be in touch following the meeting and will forward a copy of the decision within 15 days to the applicant and anyone who has requested to be notified. Should you have any questions after the meeting, we encourage you to reach out to staff. The applicant, the minister, or any prescribed public body with an interest in the matter may appeal the committee's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal within 20 days of the decision or notice date by submitting appeal through the e-file portal. Details about the e-file system are provided in the notice of decision. I will now ask Chris Nelson, our community services coordinator, to provide an overview of how members attending virtually can participate. Can you hear me online?
So Chris is part of this little speech here. If you couldn't hear him. So once the meeting is open to the public, the chair will ask anyone if there are any questions or comments. Members of the public attending virtually will be asked to use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. This alerts us that you would like to speak. Staff will then notify the chair that someone would like to speak and then proceed to unmute your microphone. You will receive a notification that your microphone has been unmuted. Please wait a second after unmuting your microphone before speaking. If you are calling in by phone, please dial *9 when you would like to raise your hand during the meeting. You will hear a prompt on the phone that you have raised your hand, and you will be notified when your microphone has been unmuted.
In the unlikely account that we have connection issues and the meeting cannot be restored within 15 minutes, the meeting will be postponed and staff will be in touch with each applicant. A notice will also be posted on the township social media letting you know. Approval of the agenda of 08 July 2025, moved by Francis Smith, seconded by Susan Irwin. That the agenda of July 8th, 2025 be adopted as presented, or are there any amendments?
No, there is not.
All those in favor? Carried. Are there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof?
Yes, I have bill number 6, application for consent, and application for minor variance number 7. It's a relative.
Approval of the minutes of July 8th, 2025, moved by Dan Meeks, seconded by Philip Smith, that the minutes of June 10th, 20.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that should have been June 10th.
Okay. That the minutes of June 10th, 2025 be adopted as, are there any amendments?
No, there is not.
All those in favor? Carried. Application 20240040 Shuk. Ms. Kapusta, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a presentation here that we can all follow along with. As the committee is aware, this is an application that was before the committee in March of this year and was deferred at that time to allow an opportunity to make changes, alterations, hopefully to work with township planning and county planning staff as well as our VCA to alter the application to a situation where it would be a supportable application. So this is for a property located at Part Lot 1, Concession 3 in the geographic township of Olden, municipally known as 1380 Mountain View Estates Lane. This is to recognize construction that began without permits or planning approvals. However, as I like to always note, that planning staff do review these applications as if no work had begun. Looking at as if this wasn't here, would this be something that we would recommend approval of as the proposal? So this proposal is to construct a dry boathouse and oversized viewing deck. As I noted previously, and I reiterate again, the boathouse as a standalone item would not need planning approvals, but is part of the overall structure of the viewing deck combination boathouse structure. So it is shown in the pictures and noted in both the report and on all the sketches. Additional to the previous submission is a request for minor variance to recognize a storage shed, gray vinyl storage shed located approximately 7.4 meters or 23 feet from the high water mark of the lake when a 30-meter setback is required for that. So either the storage shed or the other storage structure could be considered a dry boathouse, but you only get one. So if there's a boathouse, minor variance is required for the shed. If there's no boathouse viewing structure, then the storage shed could be permitted as a dry boathouse without additional planning or approval. So the request is to recognize both structures and permit the continued use of both structures in their existing locations. Again, as I noted before, the application submitted does show the viewing deck and a gazebo. However, the gazebo is part of the overall footprint of the deck, as a gazebo by bylaw definition would be freestanding, and a viewing deck is permitted to have be covered and enclosed with screens as long as there's no walls. So the intent is that the gazebo shown on there is to be placed on top of the viewing deck and is permitted as part of that viewing deck. So the existing construction, as I noted, has been undertaken. The current deck is 49 square meters or 527 square feet, and that's for the deck area. That does not include the footprint for the boathouse, and it also does not include the footprint for the stairs and landing that extend down to the water. The stairs and landing constitute an additional 15.8 square meters or 170 square feet. So the total of that is well in excess of what will be permitted for a viewing deck. As I noted, the current bylaw provisions permit a viewing deck footprint, and that includes stairs and access, of 16.7 square meters or 179 square feet. And that's provided a minimum setback of 15 meters or 49.2 feet from the high water mark is achieved. So the initial proposal that was before the committee in March was for a viewing deck with an area of 36.3 square meters, or about just under 400 square feet. Now, what is being proposed is a viewing deck of 44.6 square meters, or about 480 square feet. And that measurement is again reflected without the additional stairs that access to the lake. Initially, the deck was proposed at a water body setback of 2.1 meters and now is requesting a setback of 0 meters. This does result from some of the suggestions received by the applicant and as a result of their consultation with the environmental consultant Ecological Services to look at some water body runoff mitigation measures. Planning staff do recognize that the initial proposed area, there was some calculation challenges with what was submitted versus what was constructed on site. So while the initial proposal was for 36 square meters for that deck without the stairs, the actual construction that was undertaken does reflect the existing construction numbers that were stated here on the slide and in the planning report of the 527 square foot deck plus the 170 square foot stairs. So there was a little bit of a discrepancy there, but that's kind of why we've gone up, even though the applicant's requesting a reduction compared to what's on site now, if that makes sense. Okay, so here on this next slide, I'm going to try and sort of walk through timelines and refresh everyone so we're all aware. These are the sketches that were submitted with the initial application. So you can see the one on the right shows the entire property with there's a sleep cabin on site, septic system, well, the cottage, as well as the boathouse gazebo structure proposed. And then the one on the left was a detail of that, again, noting that the part that's shown as gazebo really is actually part of the viewing deck, but it is delineated as which parts of it will be covered because not the entire structure is proposed to be covered. Again, at this point, the shed wasn't shown, but as I said, planning staff do recognize there was some challenges in there and some calculation issues. So now on the screen, you can see this is the plot plan submitted with the revised application. Again, shows the boathouse gazebo structure. We do have, it says see detailed plans, and those are the next slide, so we can see more details on that. But this one does also reflect the shed located, which would be to the right of the gravel driveway if you're looking at the property from the lake. Okay, so again, this is sort of a description of the revised application. As we know, we deferred that to try and work out some different things. And the full timeline can be found in the planning report, but planning staff and conservation staff did meet with the applicant several times, including conducting a joint site visit to ensure everyone could look at all of the same things at the same time, have the same discussion, and there wasn't any question of what was said or not said. We felt that was the most fair way to do it, is to have everyone all at the same time, because then there's, as I said, that good wholesome discussion on the entire property. As well as revising the setback and area for the footprint of the deck and adding the storage shed. The applicant did engage the services of an environmental consultant, Ecological Services, who did provide a letter of opinion regarding the proposed development. This letter did note possible mitigation measures to address the erosion hazard concerns raised by our VCA in their initial comments. However, planning staff would like to note that the letter from Ecological Services did say it would be up to our VCA to review their findings and determine if the mitigation measures suggested were appropriate or feasible on the site. Also submitted with that, the applicant again retained the services of a planning consultant, something we always recommend, help through these processes. The planning consultant is JP2G, and they submitted a planning justification report in support of the application. And it was the opinion of that planner that the proposal does meet the 4 tests of the minor variance. So that would be, is it minor? Is it appropriate for the property? Does it meet the intent of purpose of the township official plan? And does it meet the intent and purpose of the township zoning bylaw? As detailed in the planning report from staff, county planning staff disagreed with the conclusions of that and provided our own rationale for the 4 tests of the minor variance based on the information provided in site visits. It was noted that during the review of that planning justification report, it does not appear that the planner who completed that did any site visits to the property, as the report noted that the measurements shown in the sketches were provided by a contractor on the applicant's behalf, and all the photos in that report were supplied by the applicant themselves. It didn't specifically say that, but it to us does suggest that a site visit wasn't conducted. Something I found really helpful when we were doing ours is when you're on site, you can really get a better idea of it. It isn't necessarily required, but it's just something that we're noting as part of our review. So here on the next slide, these are the sketches that were submitted as attachments to that planning justification report. On the left, you have the existing situation. So you can see that there's the deck area, the diagonal part at the rear, that's where that boathouse would attach. So that shows the deck area and the stairs extending down to the lake where they do connect to the floating dock in the lake. On the right is the proposed reduction. So you can see there is an area at the right-hand side of that picture where there's a cutout. Currently, I believe there was a planter in that location when we conducted the site visit. So it was suggested that we could help reduce the overall deck area by removing that portion of it to help increase the ability for shoreline revegetation. So that's kind of as I said, you can see the existing situation, and then this reflects the current proposed minor variance request. Again, I'd like to note that the storage shed isn't shown on there, but again, it kind of comes down to one or other. A dry boathouse would be permitted. So if this structure is approved by the committee, then it would also have to look at minor variance for the shed. If this is not approved, the other shed can remain as a dry boathouse without any additional concerns. So again, shown in the report, these is sort of to give everyone some site context here. These are the photos taken in November of last year by township building officials showing the boathouse and deck under construction. Again, this is that same under construction showing from the shoreline, from the dock, giving you, as again, just sort of trying to provide appropriate site context here. You can see the cottage in the background. In January of 2025, so earlier this year, county and township planning staff did attend the site in preparation for the initial meeting in March. This was the photo at that point. It was determined that some additional construction had taken place. Again, it was essentially mostly on the boathouse at that point, so there's some flexibility depending on which boathouse was being kept. In April of 2025, or sorry, April 25th of this year, an additional site visit was conducted as there's some reports received that construction had continued and some fill had been imported. So planning staff from township and county did a couple of site visits in April and followed up with a joint site visit with conservation staff in the 28th of April. So this you can see the evolution from the previous one. The surface of the deck has been finished, the stairs have been added, and some gravel fill have been imported. And a small retaining wall under the deck to contain the gravel. My understanding is that's to help access the deck because there's a fairly steep step. So some landscaping will make that an easier step. It's about 30 centimeters right now, which is a hefty step for anybody. So this is to help sort of slope that and make it more easily accessible. Uh, And this is another shot here. There we go. Taken. This shows again just the sort of a closer view of the proximity of the deck to the shoreline and the stairs extending down almost to the shoreline. My understanding is that that connection between the stairs and the deck has been now filled in. Again, that's following recommendations from Ecological Services to help reduce erosion. So this is essentially the mostly completed structure. This is the state of the property the last time planning and township or county and township staff visited. And on the right-hand side of the picture of the driveway, I wrote left, I meant right. Sorry about that. I do have a little directional challenging sometimes. On the left side of, or the right side of the gravel driveway is the gray shed that we talked about it, that could either be a boathouse or a storage shed, depending on the committee's decision on the other structures in consideration this evening. In order to, again, show site context, the letter from Ecological Services noted that only a few trees were taken down and there was essentially very little alteration to the shoreline vegetation. So this photo here that we're going to see now, the property is actually available through Airbnb. So there was several photos that were available on the Airbnb website that we discovered as part of our research for the property. So this kind of shows a good example of, from that same perspective on the dock, the same gravel driveway, what the property looked like before any of the construction took place or before that storage shed was placed on the subject property. You can see there's quite a few trees and the cottage is essentially not visible from this angle. Again, this is next one here. This is another one. The retaining walls in place, the tarp covered items on there is approximately where the gravel fill is located in the pictures that were taken by planning staff during the visit in April. Another view, again, these last three were from the Airbnb website, not planning staff, but this kind of shows previous to any construction, the amount of screening that was in place along the shoreline and how much of the property would have been visible once the trees were in leaf. Unfortunately, a lot of the pictures that we have also have trees with less leaf. So I was trying to, again, just provide a full context of what it looked like before, what it looked like through the construction, and what it looks like currently in support of the planning opinion. So this has a lot of words on it. It's just to help people follow along. I'm not necessarily going to read all of them because they were detailed, but RVCA did provide comments in January of this year and did not support that initial application as presented. Their concerns include site drainage and erosion hazards, especially with regards to addition of significant added hardened surfaces. The structure is within the RVC regulated area, but as proposed in March, the staff wouldn't have been able to issue a permit, and that's at the reduced area of the less than what is currently on site. So the revised proposal was circulated, including the letter of opinion from Ecological Services, planning justification report, and again, our VCA did conduct a site visit along with township staff, so they had their own view of the property and their own pictures. We did not provide those, but we did provide all the supporting documentation for their review. Based on their review, they do still have concerns regarding the development and the extent of it. And in their comments stated that the supporting information provided did not sufficiently address the erosion hazard concerns that they had raised in the opinion of their RVCA staff. In fact, it noted that the slope to the property was considered a steep slope. It's a 2-to-1 slope, so anything greater than 3-to-1 is required by RVCA to have a geotechnical review provided for any permit applications. They did note that that was not provided with this report, although the other submitting supporting documentation did identify that steep slope. RVCA policies do permit in some cases certain exceptions like uncovered and enclosed decks if they meet a certain setback and a certain size up to usually about 160 square feet. Again, those are the RVCA policies, so I don't have all the details, but they do did note that they have those different exceptions. They also noted the difference in boathouse versus the township definition. To RVCA, they're both storage structures. Neither of them is a boathouse because neither of them touches the water. Again, that's just different places have different rules, so that was a note that they had in there. Finally, they did note that the cleared shoreline area exceeds the 25% permitted within an RVC regulated area. Again, this is per their policies. Their comment stated that for a property of this width, that would equate about a 12.5 meter sort of amount of the shoreline that could be cleared for that activity area. And based on the comment or the items submitted, the gravel driveway, the shed, and the boathouse viewing deck combination come out to about a 30-meter width of cleared. So it's in excess of all the RVCA policies. That, in conjunction with the natural hazard concerns, made it that they were unable to support it, and they will be unable to issue a permit for it in its current situation. The township did consult obtain a legal opinion from the township solicitor, just kind of reiterating that even should the committee approve the minor variance, it does not guarantee that the RVCA would be able to issue a permit if it did not meet their own policies and regulations, and the size and location of it does not meet that. And RVCA did indicate that they wouldn't be able to issue a permit for it. So there is that kind of dilemma. Unfortunately, without the RVCA permit, no township building permit could be issued because the Ontario Building Code does consider RVCA regulations applicable law. So that would have to be in place. So there's that kind of challenge between township permitting and MVC or minor variance approval. One of the other items addressed was accessibility. And that was also discussed with the township solicitor and looked into. And the OADA, Ontario does not apply to private properties. So the municipality has no duty to accommodate a private property owner's access to the water, and private property is not subject to that, a duty to accommodate, similar to like the township hall here, where there is that duty to accommodate. It's the opinion of planning staff that the uneven terrain and either the stone steps or steep gravel slope that lead down to the viewing deck provide a greater hindrance to accessibility and wheelchair access to the viewing deck than the size of the deck itself. Again, the stairs that do extend down to the deck, from the deck to the shoreline, do not add to the accessibility for wheelchair access, as again, they are stairs. So there was some challenges with the view of it from an accessibility point of view. There's no septic review required, as there's no increase in interior living space, and this is not near an existing septic system. And there've been no public comments received regarding this application. So, in conclusion, after my short, long story, the planning recommendation is to deny the application as submitted and for the reasons detailed in the planning report. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shook, you have something to say? If you come up to the table and push the long bar on the microphone, it'll turn it on. Center bar.
Can you hear me? Hello, everyone. Thank you for your time today. I want to begin to acknowledge that this has been a complex process, and I appreciate the opportunity to present again. Throughout this experience, we've learned a great deal, and I recognize that there are moments where things could have been handled differently. From the very beginning, our intent has always been to do the right thing, both from an environmental and family accessibility needs. To give some background, in 2023, we originally applied for a retaining wall to provide flat space for my stepmother, who uses a wheelchair due to her disability, which was why it was highlighted in the planning report. She has MS. It was actually an RVCA representative who suggested that a deck would be more environmentally friendly solution. Based on that guidance, we changed course and moved forward with the deck. believing it was the right path for both accessibility and shoreline protection. This is just wanted to show a picture here, of just, my stepmother, this is the family, this is why we built the deck, this is the family here, just to give some context. Since then, we've taken the time to educate ourselves based on the recommendation. We hired an environmental consultant. We hired a planner based on the recommendation of the municipality, who really is going to be leading the presentation today. I will pass it off to Anthony, who I believe is online. I know in his report, I don't know, I wanted to share, I had a handout here. I know I was supposed to ask permission to get that advance. Do I just reference it and hold it out, or can I hand them out, or what's the?
No,
No, okay.
I see. Because members of the committee and the public have not had a chance to review that prior, I'm going to deny that request.
Okay, no problem.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Committee of Adjustment. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Anthony Homick, and I'm the manager of the planning team and a senior planner at JP2G Consultants. And I'm coming to you virtually this evening from Pembroke. As you heard, I was retained by Mr. Shook to assist at hopefully arriving at a resolution, as Ms. Kapusta mentioned. I think that Ms. Kapusta did a very nice job summarizing the application history and the variances requested and the change to those requested variances that are before you this evening. So I'm not going to go through that. What I will do is I will walk through my assessment of the 4 tests of a minor variance. And then I will pass it back to Mr. Shook, who I believe will has a few more words to close off with. But the first test, as you've heard, is whether or not the application is in keeping with the general intent and purpose of the official plan. So as you will have seen in Ms. Kapusta's report and my report, the property is designated rural area and waterfront area. And the waterfront area designation permits low-density residential uses together with accessory structures. The official plan includes a series of very good goals applicable to the waterfront area, including protecting the character of the waterfront, retaining and promoting the waterfront's unique recreational character, and preserving and enhancing the high quality of the recreational and biological aspects of the waterfront. Now, many of these principles, objectives, and general development policies in the official plan are aimed at preserving the character and integrity of waterfront areas. And this is both from a natural and a built form perspective, all while promoting the use of these areas for recreational purposes. In order to assess conformity with the environmental policies and those policies specifically aimed at environmental protection, I've relied on the letter prepared by Ecological Services, as you heard from Ms. Kapusta, that was included in our submission. And now the representative from Ecological Services concludes that due to the north-facing shoreline on the subject property and the existing tree canopy, the deck that has been constructed does not significantly alter the natural conditions that existed prior to the installation, with the exception of the removal of a few trees. As you will have seen in my planning submission, Mr. Shook provided me with a series of photos of other similar properties on the lake. And I hope you will have taken the opportunity to review those photos, where you will have seen numerous examples of other large decks and waterfront structures and otherwise altered or disturbed shorelines on this lake. And as you can also see in the submission in my planning letter, from the photo of the subject property from the water, efforts have been made to retain as many existing trees and as much vegetation as possible to lessen the visual impact on the lake. With respect to hazard lands, as you heard, there is a concern over the hazard lands. According to the site visit conducted by Ecological Services, the lands where the deck is located slope at approximately 2-to-1 towards the lake, but there is no evidence of significant erosion, and there are recommendations contained in the environmental report to mitigate these concerns. So taking all of the relevant policies into consideration, it's my opinion that the application is in keeping with the general intent and purpose of the official plan. The second test is the application in keeping with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. Water setbacks are largely in place to ensure that there is an adequate buffer between water bodies and buildings with the aim of protecting water quality and shoreline integrity, which again, we all agree are important. However, with appropriate mitigation measures, it is possible to locate structures closer to a water body without an adverse impact on water quality or the integrity of the shoreline. And in other words, it is possible for a deck that is larger than permitted in a zoning bylaw to exist closer to a water body than a deck that complies with the bylaw but does not otherwise include any mitigation measures for erosion, for example. The introduction of this deck, aside from the removal of some trees, as I have mentioned, does not significantly alter the natural conditions that existed prior to its installation. The slope, which is primarily bedrock, does not appear to represent an unstable or a hazardous one. However, this can be confirmed through the geotechnical or slope stability assessment that is required for the RVCA permit, as Ms. Kapusta mentioned. And so therefore, it is my opinion that the application is in keeping with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. The third test is the application minor in nature? And as you will all likely know, there is no definition for minor. So assessing a variance purely as a percentage or a numerical increase or decrease against what is permitted is not necessarily the way or the only way to determine if an application is minor or not. And in my opinion, we must also look at potential impacts. With the implementation of the recommendations that are proposed by ecological services, it's my opinion that erosion and slope stability concerns can be mitigated. And then relying again on the photos of other similar examples around the lake, it's my opinion that this deck is well within the range of other decks and waterfront structures that exist nearby. And it's therefore my opinion that the application is minor in nature. The last test is the application desirable for the appropriate development of the land? And with respect to desirability, as noted, the deck does not significantly alter the natural environment and is not anticipated to have any significant impacts on the lake with the inclusion of the recommendations provided by ecological services. There are also no adverse impacts anticipated on the enjoyment of any neighboring properties. And so it is therefore my opinion that the application is desirable for the appropriate development of the property. So to conclude, it is my professional opinion that the application meets the 4 tests of a minor variance under the Planning Act. With respect to slope stability, as I noted, Mr. Shook would have to complete a geotechnical or slope stability assessment for an RVCA permit. So this concern can be addressed through that process. And it could also be attached as a condition of approval of this minor variance if committee was so inclined. With respect to the erosion and potential impact on the lake, it's my opinion that based on the recommendations of ecological services, these can be mitigated. And these mitigation measures could be implemented through the RVCA permit process or as conditions to the minor variance if committee was so inclined. And lastly, I just want to make one point that I think is a very important one. With all due respect to Ms. Kapusta and the county planners and township staff, I believe that the built form character of the lake has not been given enough consideration. As discussed, there are many examples of other waterfront structures on this lake, which, while some have existed for years and others have been approved much more recently, they all form part of the built form character of this lake, and in my opinion, need to be assessed in determining if the application fits within this character. And I leave you with my submission to you that the application would be firmly in keeping with the character of the lake and would not look out of place at all when observed from the water. Thank you very much for your time. I'll pass the mic back to Mike, and I'm available for questions if committee has any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. So I wanted to just share, like, before the committee makes this decision, I want to respectfully highlight some comparable precedents in our municipality. I wasn't able to do it in a highlight, a handout, but this is a planning report from last year at 684 square feet. It has the same slope, 2-to-1. Basically, it says that it's minor in nature because of the high and steep slopes along the entire water frontage. It's minor because the additional dock area will serve as recreational area for the property. These are how they address the minor test or the 4 test. I have other examples. I spent a lot of time, Jody or Judy was very helpful in giving me the information of where to get that. And I'm just bringing this up today because I just want, there is comparisons in what Anthony talked about. You know, I have one on my lake where there's a sleep cabin that was approved, right? On Richmond Lane, it's right across from me. And the RVCA and municipality worked with them, and I'm hoping that we can all work together to come up with the solution that's great for the environment, but works for all parties. You know, really the intention, I do have another summary on just kind of why the deck. I mean, it gets into, you know, just some, you know, bylaw stuff and that's what I was going to share as well. But, you know, I think I want to make sure everyone's aware that from the beginning, you know, I met with the RVCA because I thought I was doing the right thing. We wanted a retaining wall. That was our initial thing. If, you know, if we wanted to, you know, bypass all compliance, we would have just built the retaining wall, right? We thought we were doing the right thing. I've got, you know, based on the recommendation from the municipality, we got the planner, we got the environmentalist, you know, to help with this. And, you know, that's why Anthony's, you know, opinion, I hope he put some weight into that. I've always wanted to try to work and make things right. So I think, you know, I just want to share that this isn't a luxury deck. It's modest viewing platform built to ensure the safety and inclusion for my stepmom. Denying this variance, I think fails to recognize the duty to accommodate. So I did actually reach out to the human rights, just to say, hey, this is what's happening. And I have documents that I can share if needed that, you know, basically differs on that opinion. But, you know, I don't want that to be about this. I want this to be about, you know, Anthony, you know, he didn't mention anything about the disability. That wasn't part of his planning report. I just want to make sure that the committee's aware of that is something that's what drove to get to this flat area for my family member. I just want to make sure that we're looking at, you know, the past approvals, the planning, environmental support, the minimal impact on the environment, meeting the four tests from Anthony's perspective, which I understand is critical in these decisions. And I think Anthony made a great point, is that, you know, a deck that has no environmental measures versus a larger deck that, you know, I'm willing to invest the money and time and expertise to really minimize any impact on the environment, which was the riprap geotechnical assessment. Happy to do anything that can help with the overall environment. So I really hope kind of we can, you know, look at that and what we can do to help there. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any of the members of the committee have any questions? Ms. Gowdy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is to Mr. Shook. Mr. Shook, I don't understand this process. You've really tried to work with the planners and everything, but you continued to build and finish off this deck with knowing that there's the possibility that it's not going to go through. So could you make me understand how your
Yeah,
thought
that
process worked?
was a misunderstanding with the RVCA. So, you know, it was a misunderstanding. We thought we were doing a good thing by reducing the deck. We put in a planter box, reduced the deck size. There was an email we got that they would support approximately a 240 square foot deck to 260. If we reduced the deck to that size, they would do a closed violation. So there's a little bit of misunderstanding there, where we went ahead, built the deck, reduced it from the original footprint. The original footprint, the deck was probably closer to like 650 square feet. So we did reduce it, built in the planter box. I thought that would help. But that's where the misunderstanding was, is that, but the deck was still larger, and that's where the measurement issues come in, is, yeah. So that there was a misunderstanding there, but I know it doesn't look good.
Are there any more questions from the committee? Mr. Nelson, is there anybody online who has anything to say?
Please use the raise hand feature if you'd like to speak. Seeing none.
I thank you, sir. I'm going to read out the motion. Application 2024-0040 Shook, moved by Nikki Gowdy, seconded by Duncan McGregor. That minor variance application APPN 2024-0040 Shook for concession 3, part 1, Geographic Township of Olden, 1380 Mountain View Estate Lanes, Township of Central Frontenac, be denied for a viewing deck with a maximum footprint of 44.6 square meters or 480 square feet and a setback of 0 meters, 0 feet to the high water mark of Long Lake, and a storage shed with a minimum water body setback of 7.4 meters or 23.4 feet to the high water mark of Long Lake. And further, that the Secretary Treasurer shall issue the notice of decision in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, including providing the notice of decision to the applicant, any person or public body that made a written request to be notified, and any other person or public body prescribed. All those in favor? Carried. I'm sorry, sir.
I guess the question is, does Mr. Shook need to tear down some of the stuff that's been put there? Otherwise, the impact is still there.
Well, he will have an opportunity to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So if he does pursue that process, then we will wait for that decision. But depending on if that is the route that he chooses and if the tribunal agrees with the decision, and then it would need to be removed. But if it was approved at the tribunal, then it would stay.
So can I ask a question?
Sure.
So my understanding through this process is you can reapply. Is that a misunderstanding, or does it have to go to the Ontario Land Tribunal?
I can answer that. So if you'd like to appeal this decision, that does go to the Ontario Land Tribunal. If after 20 days you have not appealed this decision, you are welcome to apply as many times for as many variances on the property as you wish.
Okay.
Again, we always recommend pre-consultation to ensure that we can do some sort of supportability, but at any point you could apply for a new application. We can't do anything for changes to this. For this specific one, you'd have to appeal this decision, or you can just start again with a new application. It's entirely up to you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you.
Okay, application for consent 20250013 Meeks and applications for minor variance 20250014 Meeks. Ms. Kapusta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, multiple things. So here on the screen, as you can see, this is a combined application for consent for the creation of a new rural residential lot on McLean Road. Concurrently submitted is an application for minor variance, as the lot proposed does not meet the minimum required by the zoning bylaw for the rural zone. So, excuse me, the minimum required lot area for a new lot creation in the rural zone is 0.8 hectares or 2 acres in area. The application submitted is for a lot with an area of 0.51 hectares or 1.25 acres. Planning staff would like to note that was previously the minimum lot area for new lot creation in the rural zone. Not that that generally matters for this one, but that is sort of where the applicant had got that sort of an idea and that sort of sizing from. So as I noted, the property is looking at creating a new lot, 1.25 acres in area, and the lot will have 60 meters or 200 feet of frontage on McLean Road. The retained parcel will have about 102 meters or 370 feet, and that is also on McLean Road, not Crow Lake Road. I'm sorry, I'm having a day with that. It's up here, just not always out there. So the lot will meet the minimum road frontage requirements, just not the lot area. The severed parcel has no water frontage. However, the retained parcel will have retain its existing water frontage of 221 meters of frontage on Watson Lake. And additionally, as the property is zoned rural, there is currently on the proposed lot, the applicant is working to construct what was currently considered an additional dwelling unit, as you are permitted on a rural lot. And the retained parcel at 4.5 acres or 1.8 hectares in area, more than sufficient space to accommodate both of those dwellings. When looking at minor variance for reduced lot area, what planning staff are really trying to ensure is that the reduction in lot area can sufficiently accommodate a suitable building envelope that can include the driveway, road access, it can have the appropriate septic servicing and water supply, in this case through a well, as it is not on waterfront. So the applicant has applied for and obtained an entrance permit from the Township Public Works for a second entrance that will service this new lot. They have applied for and obtained a construction permit for the new dwelling and for the installation of a septic system that is appropriately sized to service the new dwelling. Based on that, it's the opinion of planning staff that the minor variance is indeed minor. It does meet those 4 tests. It's minor, it's desirable, meets the intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw, and that the new lot can be appropriately serviced. And there's no conflict between the existing and proposed or undercurrent construction future development on the property. I'm just going to wait. So here on the next slide, you can see the subject properties outlined in red. So it's kind of long and narrow. One of the other things looking at is, would there be an alternative location on the property to create a lot that would comply with the minimum lot area? The extent of the wetlands and the frontage on Watson Lake, coupled with the unique shape of the property, means that locating the lot in an alternate location would require reductions in 30-meter setback to water, which is also not desirable for environmental protection purposes, as we frequently look at. So it's the opinion of planning staff that these both applications should be approved as submitted, as the alternate locations are really not realistic and not feasible on this property, given the layout and the natural heritage features. This application was circulated to Rideau Valley Conservation Authority due to the natural features. They have no concerns to the approval of either application as proposed, and there's no identified natural hazard concerns that would impact the creation of this new lot or the development of it. As I noted, there's an issued septic permit for this dwelling, and there were no public comments received regarding the application. So planning staff are recommending that both applications are approved, subject to the conditions outlined in the planning report. Thank you.
I just wanted to let the committee know, we did speak with the township solicitor about the timing, because I was concerned that we would go over the time. He said that that was no problem, that nobody's being denied the right to attend council. So if we start a little bit later for the council meeting, that's fine. The public just gets the benefit of a little committee of adjustment show. So I just wanted to let everyone know that ahead of time.
Does the applicant or their agent have anything to say? Are there any questions from the members of the committee? Is there anyone online, Mr. Nelson?
Seeing no one?
Okay. Moved by Cindy. Negative. Moved by Lynn Claggett. Seconded by Philip Smith. That minor variance application 2025-0014 Meeks for concession 2, part lot 5, 2574 McLean Road, Geographic Township of Olden, Township of Central Frontenac, be approved, allow for a reduction in the required lot size of 0.81 hectares or 2.0 acres to 0.51 acres, hectares or 1.25 acres, and that effective the application is to permit a variance from section 4.28.5 of the zoning bylaw 2011-52 as amended to allow the development. And further, that the Secretary Treasurer shall issue the notice of decision in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, including providing the notice of decision to the applicant, any person or public body that made a written request to be notified, and any other person or public body prescribed. And that consent application 20250013 Meeks for concession to Part Lot 5, 2574 McLean Road, Geographic Township of Olden, for the creation of a 0.51 hectare or 1.25 acre parcel as a new lot be approved, subject to the conditions noted in the planning report. And that the Secretary Treasurer shall issue the notice of decision in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, including providing the notice of decision to the applicant, any person or public body that made a written request to be notified, and any other person or public body prescribed. And further, that all conditions outlined in the notice of decision shall be completed and the certificate of official issued within a period of 2 years after the notice of decision was issued, as required by the Planning Act. All those in favor? Carried. Is there any other business? Oh.
Yeah.
Correction. One more. Application 20250016 McVeigh, moved by Francis Smith, seconded by Susan Irwin. Thank you. Ms. Kapusta, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Here on the screen, I'll just let it catch up. So this is an application for permission to expand an existing legal non-complying dwelling. The current dwelling is located less than 30 meters from the high water mark of Sharbet Lake. Therefore, any additions to the building are required to have permission to expand. Again, this is an application to recognize the construction of additions that were undertaken without any building permits or planning approvals or conservation authority consultation. So the application you can see here in the very detailed sketch shows the existing cottage, and on the water side of that, an open, uncovered, unenclosed deck that is 10 feet in width and extends the length of the cottage. The additions constructed or proposed to be approved through this application are for a screen porch that will be located at the end of the cottage, and a deck addition located at the end of the existing deck that will be also uncovered and unenclosed. The deck addition will be 160 square feet. Again, there'll be no further encroachment towards the high water mark of the lake than the existing structure. And the screen porch addition will be constructed in behind of that. This property has steep slopes that lead down to the water where the structure is. There's a small flat area that's the right of way for access and parking, and then the majority of the rear of the property is a steep slope that goes up. There's very limited areas on the property to build anything. The house or the existing dwelling is in really the only flat plateau area. So when planning staff are looking at this, we're looking at whether the use is appropriate. So here on the next slide, I have sort of an air photo that you can see. So between the cottage and the water is a slope, and there's stairs for access down to that. The slope at the rear of the property starts right at the edge of that roadway for access and goes right up. It's not an accessible slope in any form and goes quite high. It's a very high steep slope along the shoreline of Sharbet Lake, as many of the slopes are that I'm sure you're aware if you've ever been out on that lake. So this does show where the screen porch is in proximity to the dwelling, and it really does increase the functionality of the dwelling and the property for the owner with the limited area that they have for development. So this application did not require a septic review as there's no increase in interior living space and the construction is not proposing the existing septic system on the property. The system is actually located at the opposite end of the structure from where the additions take place. It was circulated to MVCA for review. Their comments dated May 9th of this year did have some concerns with regards to the application. They did note that the construction has already been undertaken or substantially completed at that point. And they raised some concerns regarding the slope stability. As I noted, there are steep slopes that lead down to the water as well as at the rear. And their comments did recommend the completion of a slope stability assessment prior to the issuance of the township building permit. Given the location of the development, they did include a number of items that should be considered in this slope assessment, and that it should be reviewed by MVCA prior to the township building permit. They did note that no conservation permit would be required for these additions. However, conservation permit should have been obtained for the concrete pad and stairs that lead down to the water that were also observed on the property. Those do not require planning approvals through the township bylaw, so I am noting them as they were noted and observed on the property, but they are not subject to any planning approvals through the township. So that was more of an MVCA permit and enforcement issue, and they are currently working with the property owner to address those concerns independent of this application. Generally, planning staff wouldn't recommend approval of an application that needed a slope stability assessment in advance of having that assessment done. However, this is an existing structure. The use is not the question here. It's more of a technical side, so it was more appropriate in the planning opinion to have that done at the township building permit stage where it's engineering or structural stability can be addressed or construction as needed at that point. So generally we would want to have that in advance. And if this was vacant, we'd absolutely, this is more of a unique situation where it's a technical exercise for that. And planning staff do support the proposed use, and that's what we're looking at through this application. There are no public comments received regarding this application, and planning staff are recommending approval as submitted with conditions in the report, including that slope stability assessment prior to the township building permit issuance. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the applicant have anything they'd like to say? Do any members of the committee have any questions? Mr. Nelson, is there anyone online?
Please use the raise hand feature if you'd like to speak. I'm not seeing anyone.
Thank you. Moved by Francis Smith, seconded by Susan Irwin, that minor variance application 20250016 McVeigh for concession 8, part lot 14, geographic township of Oso, 25861B Highway 7, Township of Central Frontenac, be approved to allow for a 14.9 square meter or 160 square foot addition to an existing deck and a 32.7 square meter or 352 square foot screen porch addition to an existing cottage. And that effective the application is to permit a variance from section 5.6.2 and 4.26.5A of the zoning bylaw 2011-52 as amended to allow the development. And further, that the Secretary Treasurer shall issue the notice of decision in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, including providing the notice of decision to the applicant, any person or public body that made a written request to be notified, and any other person or public body prescribed. All those in favor? Carried. Now, is there any other business?
No, there is not.
Okay, that this meeting be adjourned until August 12th, 2025 at 5 p.m. virtually and in person at Soldiers Memorial Hall, 1107 Garrett Street, Sharbot Lake, or at the call of the chair. Moved by Dan Meeks, seconded by Philip Smith. All those in favor?